In this session, we'll see how to model a round arched window in Blender. I'll show you what I believe is the simplest and most intuitive technique for an effective rendering result, while keeping a balanced and functional level of detail. The goal isn't to make a hyper-detailed window frame, but to build a model that works correctly in most architectural visualizations, particularly when the shot isn't extremely close up. In those cases, as we'll see in other contexts, much more in-depth modeling would be required. This tutorial is therefore designed to focus on the constructive logic of the shape, showing how to get a clean and credible curvature. Starting from an extremely simple geometry like a cube using the basic tools of Blender. So first of all, let's delete the camera and the light source from the scene, then select the cube and set a front view. Go into wireframe mode and move the pivot point to the base of the cube. Let's also give the Z field a value of 0 in location. Now let's set these measurements. 100 centimeters for X, the width of the window. 6 centimeters for the frame thickness, and 160 centimeters for the total height, including the arch. Apply the scale, Ctrl A, scale. Go into edit mode, select these vertices, and press Ctrl B, move the mouse to create a bevel, and at the same time scroll the mouse wheel to insert some vertices that give me the roundness, the curvature. Open the bevel window down here, set the width parameter to 50 centimeters, half the window width and segments to 24. Let's also select these vertices, and instead of repeating these operations, press Shift R. At this point, we'll definitely have 4 vertices due to the joining of the 2 curvatures. And we can see it by turning on statistics. In fact, we see here that I've selected 4 vertices and not 2 out of 104. Okay, let's hide the statistics for a moment. Just press M and choose the by distance option. And there, Blender removes the 2 overlapping vertices. Let's go into solid mode. And in selection mode, select the face, then select these 2 faces, and press the I key to use the Inset Faces tool. Decrease the extrusion amount, bringing the faces inwards. We will set the thickness to 6 centimeters, which is the thickness of the window frame. Right-click and select Bridge Faces. Now, at this point, we need to carefully create the stop that the opening sash will rest against. So let's press Ctrl R and insert a loop cut in this position. Press F to fill the geometry. We'll do the same thing back here. Still in face selection mode, let's select these 2 faces. Press the I key again, insert this extrusion and set the thickness to 3 centimeters. Right-click and select Bridge Faces. Now let's just start organizing the outliner for our project. Let's change the default collection name to Window. Actually, we should be a little bit more precise. Arched Window, and we'll rename the geometry as Fixed Frame. Now let's see how to create the arch, the window, the opening part. Let's go into Edge Selection mode and then perform a ring selection on the edges. On this line, along this perimeter. Shift D, Enter, P, Selection. Back to Object mode, let's select this part and call it Opening Sash. Edit mode, select all, F to fill the geometry and E for extrusion. 6 centimeters. Back to Object mode. With the sash selected, press the slash key on the numpad to isolate the selection. Back to face selection mode, select these 2 faces, press the I key, and set the thickness to 4.5, right-click Bridge Faces. Now let's go ahead and create a central part, which should be just a bit thinner than this one, and will be used to hold the glass. Press Ctrl and R, then scroll the mouse wheel to make 2 loop cuts. Left click to set them and right click to release them right in the center. Select the very first loop cut, then press G and Y, making sure that vertex snapping is enabled here. Move it carefully against this outer line, then press G and Y again, followed by -0.5 to move it back exactly 5 mm. Let's do the same thing. Let's perform the same thing on this loop cut as well. GY, we snap it right here, GY 0.5, and we make it go back in. Now, since this loop cut is already selected, we press F to fill it. Let's select this inner one, F. In face selection mode, we select both of these faces. The I key, inset faces. We assign the value 1.5 to thickness. Right-click the mouse, bridge faces. Let's remember to maybe Now let's see how to create the glass. We use the usual loop cut system, so Ctrl R. Let's insert it in this central position. Shift D, P selection. Let's go back to object mode. If we select the loop cut and rename it to glass, edit mode, select all the edges, F to fill it. In object mode, let's center the pivot point on this glass geometry. Now we can consider a modern glass so that it provides both thermal and acoustic insulation. And from what I found online, these glasses have a size of about 24 millimeters, so 2.4 centimeters. That would be 4 millimeters per glass pane and 1.5 for the central air chamber. We're making a single glass pane of 2.4 centimeters, therefore. We press GY -1.2, which is the midpoint, which is half. Edit mode, select all objects in the scene, E 2.4. Okay, now switch to solid mode. There we go, the glass has also been created. Now let's activate everything with the / key. Let's make another modification. To the opening sash, we isolate it. Let's perform a loop solution. Along this perimeter, we press Ctrl B. And we drag the mouse by a certain value, a value that we assign to width of 0.5, and with segment, we set it back to 1. It's a slight bevel that is generally found on this type of window frame. Let's do the same thing for the opposite side as well. In this case too, it will be enough. It won't let me do Shift R because probably the command I ran before was followed immediately by another operation. Therefore, let's do Ctrl B again and set the width to 0.5. Okay, let's reactivate everything. Now, one thing that should always be done after a certain number of operations have been performed on a given model is to check the direction of the normals. Normals, which I remind you, must always point outwards and not inwards. In the new versions of Blender, if the normals are correct, we don't see any color. If they are directed incorrectly, pointing inwards, Blender will show them in red. By opening the Viewport Overlays window, we can click here on Face Orientation. In this case, since checking normals is something that is done quite frequently to verify the correctness of our work, if we simply right-click on Face Orientation and select Add to Quick Favorites. This will make it much easier and faster to access in the future whenever we need it. We have this opportunity. By pressing the Q key, very quickly we get the command that we have inserted inside, the favorite commands. So if I activate it, I immediately see some red coloring that isn't right. So now I've selected the fixed frame, I press the Tab key. To go into edit mode, I select everything, and it's enough to press Shift N to have Blender reorient the normals correctly. Let's select the opening sash, same operation, Shift N, while for the glass, let's try to isolate it, but it has no problems. Okay. At this point, we can take into consideration the idea of putting a handle, perhaps as a way to make it easier to use or carry, on this window. To do this, let's go into edit mode, select this face, Shift S, cursor to selected to position the 3D cursor in the middle. Let's go ahead and isolate the sash too. Now, switch to the front view and then to the wireframe view. And insert a normal mesh, usually a cube mesh. We scale it down quite a bit just to fit it inside this profile, and then we regularize it. We can give it a width of 3.5 centimeters, 7.5 in height, and a thickness of 5 millimeters. Let's go to the top view so that we can arrange it better. Let's move the pivot to the inner part. And then we place it in this position. This will be the plate that will then hold the handle. Let's go ahead and add a subdivision surface modifier, which we'll set to 2. Let's go back to the front view mode in wireframe. Let's insert 2 loop cuts in this position that we narrow slightly, and 2 in this position which we widen instead. Okay. Let's select this face and delete it. Face. Okay. Then to have, since we use the subdivision modifier to make sure that the part that isn't so rounded rests against the frame, but that it's completely flush. Let's go to the top view and in wireframe mode set the selection mode. In vertices, let's select all the vertices that rest on the sash. Press delete, but don't choose vertices, choose faces instead, so we delete the faces. This way you see that Blender makes our plate fit perfectly to the frame. Let's also activate Shade Smooth. Okay. And let's start modeling the handle. Let's select these 4 vertices. Let's also activate the pivot point and E, and move out by about 3 centimeters. Then we continue with E, R, S, and we gradually narrow the shape. So the movements are always those of extrusion, just as in this particular case. Rotation and possibly scaling. We bring this down by a certain amount, and here at the bottom we press F to close it. Now let's start modifying this attachment part where the handle will turn. So we insert a first loop cut that we bring very close. We insert another one that we bring close to the one we just created. Let's take what we created earlier with a ring selection. S. Shift Y to lock the Y-axis and we tighten it. Let's insert another loop cut here. This way we can see that the handle isn't a single piece with the plate, but instead it simulates the ability to rotate it. Let's select detach for a moment, then we can also insert further loop cuts in this area. And here I would do a Control B. Let's see if we can do it this way. This should be a little bit more. Let's try to select these 2, bring them forward. Okay, we should be there. Maybe this one a bit further back, okay. We have, let's see, okay. It's not exactly. Let's try something like this, SSZ. Let's raise it up just a bit because it seemed a little too flat. Let's try to do it like this. SZ, okay. Now we've got it. Let's just continue modeling the handle. It's still really a fairly quick process. Or maybe we'll modify it a bit here. Meanwhile, we can use SZ0 to align this tip on the same axis. S, let's close it up a bit on all sides. We can insert another one in this position as this tip looks too sharp. As A0. Let's bring it up a little bit. Okay. If we want to flatten it, we can select these vertices. SY, to be able to flatten it. Or if we also want to shorten it, we can shorten it along the Z-axis. Another thing we can do is move it inwards. In this case, it's usually best to activate or enable proportional editing, so that by carefully narrowing the area of influence, the handle can be adjusted more precisely. Also takes the layout into account, corrected from the top part as well, and not just the part we're closing. I'd say we're pretty much there. We can also add 2 loop cuts in this position so as to make this plate a bit more regular and make this area less rounded. Okay, I'd say we're done. One last thing we can do is, if we want to reuse this window in a future project, we have to make it like a block. To do this, let's move the 3D cursor to this position. Let's insert an empty object. I usually insert arrows so that by having these X and Y and Z indicators, I can see it better than the usual cross of normal axis without these indicators. Let's select everything, and finally let's select the empty object. Press Ctrl P to open the object menu. Now if I select and move only the empty object, you will see that only the empty object moves. The window follows along. S, I can scale it, and R, rotate it. Another thing we could do, for example, would be to open this sash along with the handle and the glass. So I'll select the opening sash, move the pivot point to this spot, then select the handle, the glass, and finally the opening sash again, Ctrl P, object. And at this point, if I select the sash R, I press RZ, you see that the sash can be opened. Well, that's all for this tutorial too. See you in the next one.